First episode of One-on-One with Rich Pierce. Thank you so much for joining me. Oddly enough, today will actually be a one-on-two. I'm joined by two former Ohio lawmakers, Democrat Lou Gentile, formerly a state senator representing the 30th District, and Andy Thompson, former state representative from the 95th District. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today. Happy to have you. It's our very first episode here today, so thanks for being here, both of you. And I did flip a coin earlier to see who would talk first. I know you're not running against each other. This isn't a formal debate or anything like that, and it's not because we dressed alike, Lou, but you did win the debate.
It's the inaugural.
Did win the coin flip there. Okay. Yeah, it is the inaugural. So you'll answer the first question tonight, and obviously we're going to be talking about this topic for a long time. It's a pretty heated one. A lot of folks upset about it. Drivers we've spoken with. It's the potential gas tax. Governor Mike DeWine, he wants 18 cents a gallon. The Ohio State House says you can have 10.7 and you can have it over 2 years. So, Lou, what do you think?
Well, I think it's important to know sort of where we're coming from over the last 8 years for really to get some context around this discussion, because over the last 8-year period, the state of Ohio has cut taxes, has floated bonds or issued bonds and debt, took on a lot of debt for road improvements. And so this is something that I think the governor felt like was needed, and the legislature, both parties, actually agreed with him. There's an interesting thing that happened several months ago with the leadership in Columbus, especially in the Ohio House of Representatives. I think it's important to understand that we have now a bipartisan coalition of Democrats and Republicans that have supported Speaker Householder. And that coalition, this was sort of the first test of that coalition, and it seemed to hold pretty good. It was an overwhelming vote in the Ohio House. So while no one ever likes new taxes and tax increases, I think there are some things that Democrats can point to out of this legislation that will be good for communities like Eastern Ohio. If you take a close look at what was in the bill, it's going to increase money for local spending. Governor DeWine wanted 40% of those tax revenues to come back for local bridges and roads, and now 45% of that's going to come back locally. There was a big victory for people who care about public transit, like transit, over $100 million now for public transit. So, you know, I was proud to say I voted against the leasing of the Turnpike at the time. I didn't think we should take on that debt. But now we have a real serious issue with our roadways, and there was some major compromise that took place in the Ohio House between both parties and the Speaker advancing his agenda and working with Democrats to do that. So it should be interesting to see what happens in the Senate. I feel like the Senate's been kind of cool to the notion of increasing taxes, so it'd be really interesting to see what happens once it gets over to the Senate.
Andy, what do you think?
Senate President Larry Obhoff has sent a signal that he is not very favorable toward this idea of increasing taxes, certainly not without some kind of offset. I saw a letter that was released by Grover Norquist of Americans for Tax Reform calling on the House and Senate of the Ohio legislature to really consider some kind of offset so that it isn't a net tax increase. I have a source in the Senate, which I won't name, but somebody who's a good friend of mine, and this senator said that the tax will probably come out of the final package, and that it will be more of something that they will consider in the overall budget, because you'll have more offsets there with which to kind of horse trade. But I think it is, as Lou said, it's been a different kind of thing in the Ohio House. We had an interim speaker. I was a candidate for that office, and I'm a failed candidate for that office. But this was a real different outcome when we elected the speaker this year, in that, you know, virtually half of his votes came from the Democrat side. So it was really, again, he reached out to that side. He needed those votes in order to become the speaker. And with that, a coalition was launched. And I will say this, Jack Serra, who's known here locally, is quite close with Speaker Householder, and that's probably something that's really benefiting the folks of the Channel 9 viewing area. There was a strong vote in favor of the transportation budget, but there were 27 no votes, too. Ironically, many of them who are householder people. So it's an interesting to see what happened here. If the Senate does not concur, if the Senate does take action against it, then you're going to have a bunch of people who voted for a tax increase without help from their colleagues in the Senate, and that's never a good thing to be in that position.
Now, Governor DeWine, when he proposed the 18%, he was saying it would generate $1.2 billion annually, and that would go toward fixing roads, bridges. Gentlemen, where else is that money going to come from? If it doesn't come from this tax, or if it's at 10.7 cents over 2 years. Andy, we start with you.
Well, part of the money they're proposing will come from the Oil and Gas Fund, and that's money that's going to be going back to the affected areas. during my time in the legislature, I was very concerned about a move to do such a thing because politicians in other states have shown that once they get their fingers in that cookie jar, it becomes a slippery slope. The oil and gas money is collected. It's to go toward regulatory oversight and then also to help with the orphan wells. And we just passed a bill that I had carried last session that won overwhelming support and now is helping us deal with the orphan wells, which are a real threat to our groundwater. So, you know, the argument is there's excess money there. If it's over $50 million in the fund, we will tap into that for local infrastructure. I think it's something that's worthy of discussion. But even though I am a recovering politician, sometimes when politicians have a source of money like that, and if it's not limited to infrastructure, then it becomes a general fund kind of bailout. And so I'm a little concerned about that slippery slope.
Well, and Representative Serra was instrumental in trying to get some of that severance money put back into this area, and he was successful in this transportation at directing that money at roads and bridges for Eastern Ohio, and that's something that politicians in Eastern Ohio have been trying to do for a long time. It's been a real struggle. I think it's important to remember the last 8 years during the Kasich administration where really there was very little, if any, bipartisan cooperation like you've seen in the House as of right now. And there was an approach to taking on more debt, like with the Turnpike or cutting taxes. And I think you're hearing more from this governor that's very different in terms of investing in communities and having sort of that traditional partnership with local governments that we've sort of not seen over the past 8 years. And this transportation budget and this coalition held up. And, you know, there are facets of organized labor in the state of Ohio that support this transportation budget because they know it'll bring jobs, it'll create jobs, it'll put people out building the roads and bridges. So that's an important aspect of it. Certainly you have to be sensitive to folks who are on the lower economic scale and how are they going to afford an increase in taxes. But you always have to balance that, and that's why there's the process. That's why there's a legislative process. The House obviously didn't go for the full 18-cent increase, which is what Governor DeWine was promoting. But I think to my friend Andy's point, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the Senate because from everything I've read, this President Obhoff has been very cool to this notion of raising taxes without cutting other taxes. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. You know, this is a long process, Rich. It's not just what one body passes. It's got to go to the Senate. There's got to be a bill that gets worked out in the end. And
whether it's 40%, whether it's 45%, if this does, in the end pass, going to local governments, is that enough? I mean, that's the concern that we're hearing from folks. They're saying, oh yeah, well, this will go to the 3 Cs. And it won't go anywhere else. What do you think? You think it's legitimate?
That's my concern. That was my concern. Once you tap into this, it goes to Columbus, but is that a one-way journey? And that's why I always cautioned Lou when he was in the Senate and also Jack Serra, because all of a sudden Southeast Ohio has something positive going on, and Columbus can't wait to get its hands on those revenues. We are an economic driver for this for our state. We see more economic activity coming in the form of a cracker plan if we get that. We have the best place in the world to do business when it comes to shale gas and putting that into plastics. So we really have an advantage here. And I like to see that, I like that Governor DeWine is paying attention to Appalachia, because a lot of times politicians promise things to Appalachia and then you don't hear from them until it's re-election time. So that is encouraging that he's listening to Appalachia. I think we're going to be generating a lot of economic activity for Ohio, so that should be respected. And if the money stays here, my hope was always that the money didn't go to Columbus, that it would stay here and get invested and provide more broad-based opportunity, go into foundations, go into other places where it can get right to work here in Appalachia. So what you point out there is a concern for me. I hope that the money stays here and make sure that we maximize this opportunity for the people of our region.
Luke? Well, I think it's important that you think about job creation and economic growth, but also marry that with the need for solid transportation infrastructure, roads and bridges. And so, it's going to be the job of those who are in office to advocate on behalf of those revenues coming back to our part of Ohio. I think it's a good step what Representative Serra has done with the transportation budget to redirect some of that money. I think it's like $10 million over a 2-year period. He should be commended for that. He's worked on that for a long time. But also, going forward, being able to attract businesses and an economic development climate is going to be contingent upon our ability to have solid infrastructure, roads and bridges. And so that's the balance here, is how do you make sure that we're adequately keeping up pace with the needs for our roads and our bridges across Ohio, in particular this region, which, you know, I think we're on the cusp of a real economic resurgence. When you look around the area, you see the possibility of 2 ethane cracker plants situated between Ohio, you know, right between eastern Ohio and western PA. And down in Belmont County, you see now 3 natural gas-fired power plants that are going to be coming online in this region. Of course, JSW Steel. So there's a lot of activity happening, and that needs to be married with adequate investment in our basic infrastructure, our roads, our bridges.
All right, gentlemen, stay right where you are. We are going to go to a commercial break. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes. This is One-on-One with Rich Pierce.
Dream vacations, tuition, debt, home improvements, and so much more. First Choice America can help with our great rates on our home equity loan. You already have the house. Now is the time to use the equity. Call today to set up an appointment.
It's rebate time at Auto Choice on Mastercraft tires. When you buy 2 Mastercraft tires, you get a $40 instant cash rebate. When you buy 4 Mastercraft tires, you get a $100 instant cash rebate. That's the best price in the valley on Mastercraft tires at Auto Choice.
Tired of the winter blues? Need a break from your daily grind? Ready to press pause and make time for you? Escape to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and let the calming surf, soft sand, and warm sun do the work. With amazing deals all along the coast, it's the perfect time for a seaside getaway. So make time for you. Visit Myrtle Beach, where happiness comes in waves.
Would you please call Rumor Lounge to take care of the furnace?
I know what I'm doing. How hard could this be? Hey, Bud, you know anything about fixing furnaces?
No, not really. And I know you don't either. Why don't you just call Rumor Loudon?
Honey, call Rumor Loudon.
When weather is happening, turn to Severe Weather Team 9 for the most up-to-date information.
A flash freeze occurred as expected last night as temperatures plummeted.
On air, online, Severe Weather Team 9 is everywhere you go.
What can be better than a new vehicle? How about an extra $100 in your pocket? Finance with First Choice America and get $100 cash just for you. Plus, rates are as low as 2.79% APR. Call or stop by today and get the cash you deserve.
This is One-on-One with Rich Pierce, a deeper dive into the issues that affect you.
Welcome back to One-on-One with Rich Pierce, joined by Andy Thompson and Lou Gentile, both former Ohio State lawmakers. Gentlemen, once again, thank you for joining us. We've been talking about, in case you've not been watching, we've been talking about the proposed gas tax. And Governor Mike DeWine, he's been in office for 2 months now, and this is really his first big test, right, this gas tax. And he's already, the House, not quite giving him what he wants, but is compromising at this point. So, gentlemen, do you think it was unfair to voters that this doesn't get mentioned the entire campaign and then all of a sudden, boom, 18 cents? And people in Ohio love the cheap gas.
Right.
And there are people, we've talked to folks who come over from Pennsylvania, where, of course, where we're located, and from West Virginia, coming over the line. We've got those 3 states so close to each other to buy cheaper gas.
Right. Pennsylvania has a very steep gas tax. I'm trying to remember what the number is, but it's way, way up there. So ours is relatively modest compared to that.
I believe it's 56 cents. Just off, I think it's 56 cents. I could be wrong.
Pennsylvania.
Yeah, so nobody does like to see higher taxes. One of the issues that needed to be addressed was the alternative fuel vehicles, so the hybrids and also the the straight electric cars. So that was something that is addressed in this transportation budget too. But to your topic on the governor and not having talked about this before, sometimes I think we govern by crisis. Now we've got everybody's declared that there's a road crisis, even though we had a massive stimulus plan in the previous administration. So I know that President Trump is going to be talking about, more infrastructure plans. Hopefully some good things will come from that. But certainly, this is a tough one to take out of the box. Sometimes they try to do a lot of stuff early that might not be popular, so that by the time we get to the end of 2 years, you will have forgotten some of that. The gas tax will hang around, and if prices go go up, people are probably going to feel that. So it is, 10.7 cents phased in over 2 years. The diesel is going to go up 20, and that's right, over a 3-year period, I believe. So those are all going to hit the pocketbook. We hope that they don't have a detrimental effect, but we do have infrastructure to take care of. We were talking during the break that a lot of the roads down in Marietta, Washington County, and some of those things along the river, we've had a lot of damage done by rainfall, freezing and thawing, and we're having a second round of FEMA funding coming in too. So it's very serious, very severe down there, especially some of these township roads.
Well, no politician likes to use the T word or say they're going to raise the T word.
Tea party.
But and that's why it's incumbent upon voters and the media during these elections to ask tough questions and to try to get to the bottom of this, and not just the 30-second ads, which Andy and I have both been subject to. And I also think that, ironically, typically Democrats sort of get branded with the brush of looking to raise taxes. And in this case, it's a Republican majority and the governor that are proposing that. But as I said, I think, the Democrats have done a good job here of seizing an opportunity where they built this bipartisan coalition. They recognize that in some cases they can't prevent these policies from moving forward, so they're deciding instead to compromise, which sometimes is a dirty word in politics, but they're compromising and they're doing things that are good for working people. You look at public transit, you look at more money for local communities. These are things that I think Democrats view as beneficial to small communities and working families and some of our big urban cores. So that's been their position and how they've approached this in working with Republicans. And frankly, I got to give the Speaker Householder some credit. My understanding is he was actually going to see the Democrats after negotiating with the governor's office and talking to them about what they wanted. Well, $100 million is a historic amount for transit. It's something that's never been done. The governor proposed like $40 million or something. Really, I think just a slight increase to local communities, I think, was a signal by the legislature that, hey, we want to start off on a different pace or on a different place than we did under the Kasich administration. So, again, remains to be seen what's going to happen in the Senate. And these are unpopular things to do, and I think to Andy's point, he articulated it, is that typically administrations do these things on the front end. If you remember during the Kasich administration, Senate Bill 5, some of the more acrimonious issues were all done in the first year, and you and I were there, and it was pretty interesting times. So sometimes the hard decisions get made in the early days of these administrations.
Okay. People are willing to charge up that hill, sometimes in a difficult way. There is infrastructure to take care of. The governor, to his credit, is proposing a tax increase. We'll see how that plays out, because I did see, again, a lot of conservative members of the Householder Coalition were let off the hook because he had plenty of votes to get from the other side. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. And then again, as it goes over to the Senate, if the Senate pulls that provision out, that's going to leave a few people exposed, and so maybe not some happy campers there on the House side.
All right, when we return, we're going to switch topics a little bit. And, we'll be back in just about 2 minutes. We're going to talk some gun reform in the Ohio State Legislature. We'll be back. This is One-on-One with Rich Pierce.
Dream vacations, tuition, debt, home improvements, and so much more. First Choice America can help with our great rates on our home equity loan. You already have the house. Now is the time to use the equity. Call today to set up an appointment.
For the past 42 years, and with over 28 million sold, more people have put their hard-earned money on a Ford F-Series truck than any other pickup in America. Yeah, I'd say that's money well spent. It's Ford Truck Month, America. Time to join the stampede.
Right now, get an F-150 Super Crew with over $10,000 in total savings. Visit a neighborhood Ford store dealer near you to learn more.
Alco Furniture and Appliance has been offering a wonderful selection at a low price for over 70 years. Experience comfort like never before with our full line of Lazy Boy recliners. Or get a new lift chair from Ort Furniture and Ultra Comfort. Are you looking to replace your washer or dryer? Stop by and check out our Speed Queen washers and dryers. Commercial grade, American made, and has a built-in agitator. Plus it comes with a 5 or 7 year factory warranty. It's out with the old and in with something new at Alco Furniture and Appliance.
The WMC Orthopedic and Sports Medicine team offers the best care for injured shoulders, knees, hips, and elbows.
Good morning, Mr. Oliva. How you doing?
We treat you, not just your injury. Whether you're recovering from a sports injury or suffering from a chronic joint condition, our orthopedics team are here to provide the care you need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. WMC is committed to providing the best care so you can get back to being you.
What can be better than a new vehicle? How about an extra $100 in your pocket? Finance with First Choice America and get $100 cash just for you. Plus, rates are as low as 2.79% APR. Call or stop by today and get the cash you deserve.
This is One-on-One with Rich Pierce, a deeper dive into the issues that affect you.
Welcome back to One-on-One with Rich Pierce, joined by Andy Thompson and Lou Gentile. I want to talk about now HB 228. It's billed as a fix to previous gun legislation. Andy, describe to us exactly what's going on with that.
Well, in 228, we were trying to clean up some of the code, some of the issues that had been problems in the past for the folks who care about the Second Amendment. During lame duck session, we had a fix that was in to clean up some code so that a certain particular rifle would be deemed legal in the state of Ohio. It has something to do with the barrel size, and if it's a certain length, then it qualifies as a sawed-off shotgun. There was a particular Mossberg rifle that they were trying to get worked into the legal status in Ohio. They had the language. It was put into 228. It passed through the House and went to the Senate. When the Senate was making an amendment, they got the language wrong, different parts of the code, and it kind of they got inserted in the wrong place, and it ended up creating a ban on certain types of rifles. They were going to be linked in with like bombs or other devices, ordinances, and so this was a problem. It was identified pretty quickly, but of course the session was ending, so we had to. I say we, the House and Senate had to come back in short order and come up with some with a quick fix, and I think that was kind of understood. It's one of those things we call, in effect, a technical correction. Yeah. LSC felt terrible about this, but in the rush that happens in lame duck sessions, sometimes you get some anomalies, and this was one of those.
Yeah. Right thing to do, Lou?
I mean, yes, while trying to expand gun rights, it was an inadvertent mistake. They actually banned some weapons, and so someone discovered that and decided to go back and change it. I think, I had a little different approach on this issue than most people in my party. In terms of the Second Amendment, I was a supporter in most of these gun rights bills. But I think what happens is, they had to go back in and fix it. And the reason that this happens is because at the end of last year, we had what they call these so-called lame duck sessions, which means, the elections are over, the lawmakers come back into office and are now just sort of legislating daily, but it's sort of a frenzy. And mistakes happen, and I've seen it happen before, and this was a case where they did that. And I'm sure that for those members of the legislature who live in urban areas and who have a different approach to this issue and, were vehemently opposed to this type of legislation, this sort of reopened that old wound a little bit for them. But it was the right thing to go back and make that correction. I'm sure some of those folks didn't want to have to rehash that debate again. But, I think the lesson learned is trying to not legislate in a frenzy at the last minute in these so-called lame duck sessions, which I think sometimes bad things for the people, bad things can happen to people in Ohio during those sessions.
How can you fix lame duck sessions?
Well, I think the reason they're called lame duck sessions and why some parties feel they're useful is because people are leaving and they can cast a vote that they won't be held accountable for, and that's why it's called lame duck. So the election has happened, who's going to be there and who's not going to be there. The folks who are departing might take a tougher vote than they normally would if they had to face the voters again. So it's not a good thing. I don't think it's a good thing in Washington. I don't really think it's a good thing in Columbus either because of that lack of accountability.
I can recall being on the Senate floor at 4 in the morning for redistricting reform. I don't know about you. I'm a night person, but at 4 in the morning, sometimes it's hard to really digest when you're reading legal code that late at night. So sometimes these things that's the way they go.
All right. Well, we'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Each of you will get a final word when we return. This is One-on-One with Rich Pierce.
Dream vacations, tuition, debt, home improvements, and so much more. First Choice America can help with our great rates on our home equity loan. You already have the house. Now is the time to use the equity. Call today to set up an appointment.
You know what's awesome about having the fastest, most reliable internet? All your kids' friends want to come over. You know what's not awesome about having the fastest, most reliable internet? All your kids' friends want to come over.
Do you like a chip?
Oh, honey, that's potpourri.
Oh, then do you want a potpourri?
No thanks, I'm driving.
Get speed, coverage, and control with Xfinity X5. Now that's simple, easy, awesome. Get started with a special offer from Xfinity for $79.99 a month for 2 years. Plus, get DVR service free for a year. Click, call, or visit a store today.
Guys, I want you to meet someone. This is Jamie. You're going to be seeing a lot more of him now.
Not calling him Dad.
Oh, no.
Look, I get it. Some new guy comes in, helping your mom bundle and save with Progressive. But hey, we're all in this together. Right, champ?
I'll get more nuggets.
How about some carrots? You want to ruin your dinner?
You're not my dad!
That's fair. Overstepped.
Hi, I'm Bob Caleffi from Weirton Tire and Auto. We offer honest quality service for all your needs and at the right price. Our tires come with a 30-day customer satisfaction guarantee. We are a full-service auto repair and tire shop. That includes brakes, alignments, check engine problems, and much, much more. Call or stop in today for an evaluation and estimate.
What can be better than a new vehicle? How about an extra $100 in your pocket? Finance with First Choice America and get $100 cash just for you. Plus, rates are as low as 2.79% APR. Call or stop by today and get the cash you deserve.
This is One-on-One with Rich Pierce, a deeper dive into the issues that affect you.
All right, we are back one-on-one with Rich Pierce. This is our final segment. We have just about 2 minutes. So each of our guests will get to have 1 minute to talk about what they want to talk about. First, we go to Lou. Lou, you won the coin toss earlier, so have at it.
Well, thank you for having us on the inaugural
It's a pleasure.
I think it's been productive.
Yes.
I think interesting to watch what's going to happen over the next 2-year period in the state of Ohio, to see some of the compromise happening and to see some different things occurring. I also want to put a plug in regionally here because I think that there's a lot of opportunity going forward in eastern Ohio. As I sort of alluded to earlier, you look at the potential for this area to have 2 ethane crackers regionally, along with 3 power plants that are being proposed in this area and will be under construction. I think that bodes well for the people in this region in terms of the economics, JSW Steel. I think it's going to be incumbent upon us as a region to ready our workforce, to make sure we're making good investments in workers and in our infrastructure to do things that will help us. So.
Sorry, Lou, you're out of time.
You stole my thunder there, but I would add in that the workforce is a serious issue for us right now. We may have to import some former Ohioans because I think a lot of Ohioans have left and gone to other states where there was more opportunity at that point. If we bring them back, they're people who appreciate this area for its virtues and values and everything. And I think if we can get we reunite families who might have been broken up over this process. We bring back that intellectual capital to Ohio, and we make our counties and cities stronger. Again, Eastern Ohio is going to be where all the action is going to be happening, and it will be not just processing of oil and gas, but also plastics and other things that we can reshore from overseas and get some generational economic growth.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for joining us for the very first edition of One-on-One with Rich Pierce. In this case, it was a 1-on-2. I want to thank Annie Thompson and Lou Gentile for being with me today. Gentlemen, thank you so much. I'll be back next Saturday at 8:30 with Steubenville City Manager Jim Mavromatis. We'll be talking the state of the city and the future of it. Hope you're having a great morning. Have a great day.